Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Lucia Dore. She is a financial investigative journalist, author, and refugee advocate. Welcome to the show, Lucia.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You are welcome. You are welcome to the show, Lucia. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure.
Yes, I like my time. I've always enjoyed my time in India.
Wonderful. So welcome to the, not only just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. We'll talk about unraveling complex issues through effective communication. So one thing, my question to you, Lucia, is to understand you have an expertise on the Israel-Gaza war, and there is another war going on in Europe. So I want to understand, when we talk of effective communication, what sort of communication will need to end these two wars going on, especially the Israel-Gaza war? There seems to be so many communications.
They need to speak the same language, and they don't at the moment, and yet they're both from the Middle East. And I've spent quite a lot of time as a journalist in the Middle East, and I know that you communicate differently with the Arab world than you do with the Asian world or New Zealand or the West. And people in the West believes that the Arab world is sometimes not telling them what they want to hear, but they have a different element, I think, of time.
Right.
So I think they need to communicate better at all levels. And the problem is, I know when I was working in the United Arab Emirates as a journalist, that people would say to me, oh, if I wanted to know anything, I'd call the American lawyers who knew everything about everything. And often a number of people would say, oh, it's because they work for the CIA, and they didn't pay any tax, either in America or in the UAE. So I don't know. The real position was, but they communicated differently with the US than they did, say, with the DIFC or with the Arabs or whatever. So it's about time they all got down and started talking.
Absolutely.
And I don't think they can. Unfortunately, the Qataris will think differently from the Egyptians, who think differently from the Israelis and from the Palestinians. So, and the Americans think differently again. They all want to intervene, don't they?
Right, Lucia. So, you see, there is so much of communication still happening. The US is talking, other countries are talking. So, what is this then? What sort of communication is needed? You tell they are not talking properly. But then,
I think the issue is that people don't listen. I think they forget. They think communication is about talking and getting your point across. But sometimes it's about listening. And I think the art of listening is maybe disappearing, and maybe that's a consequence of social media. And we hear so much noise. And we forget to just sit back. And sometimes it's got to be.
Then what is the best way to communicate if you look at it from a say personal life standpoint of view, and also from the business point of view? What is the best way to communicate? Not speak, but listen. But then how do you do when there are also other sorts of interests involved, especially in business?
I think the important thing is, I think the art of negotiation has almost been forgotten. I also have a Learn Business English course where I teach the art of negotiation. And I think that is very important. In different circumstances, you have to negotiate differently with different people in different ways. And it's just not happening.
Right. So, what is this art of negotiation? Is it negotiation to extract the maximum from the other side, or is it to reach a conclusion which is a win-win for both sides? How should we look at this
I
communication and negotiation?
You have to look at it as a win-win for both sides. I think the aim is that both parties feel that they've gone away and they've got something that they have negotiated and it's good. I think that's the reason. I think that people think negotiation is all about winning at all costs, rather than realizing that everybody has to go away and feel that they have achieved something. Negotiation is about benefiting both sides.
Right. But you see, this happens only most of the time in politics, where they discuss for 2 days about the draft, then they work out 1 or 2 words here and there, and then they say, okay, this is a consensus here, and they release the draft, but nothing happens. So how does it change lives?
But we all know how press releases are drawn up. We know what happens, and I've worked in government as well, and that the communiques were decided upon a few days before even the meeting, and then they just alter it, if they do at all, for the meeting. And if they don't achieve the results, well, there's no communique. It's all quite ridiculous. And journalists just, for the most part, particularly in the Middle East, regurgitate what's in the communique rather than analyzing beyond the word, beyond what's in the text. And I think that a lot more of that.
Right, Lucia. So you see, the world is changing in this lack of so much of communication happening. So many gadgets are there, so many technologies are there, but the right communication is not happening. And you see, there is turmoil everywhere. Either politically, you talk about refugees, you are a refugee advocate, so you talk about them. That is also, the numbers are increasing. And also, even in business, if you see, there is this great resignation going on, quiet quitting going on. Everywhere this, amidst all so much of technology, there is not that effective communication happening in today's time. So let's talk about refugees itself. That is leading to a lot of problems everywhere, for whichever side you see it. From a refugee point of view, they have nowhere to go. And from the country's point of view, there are so much of politics involved in all these things. How can still we find a middle ground amidst all these changing things in terms of communication? Because it is a fact that problems are created by few people, and again, they are the ones who are trying to talk about peace and democracy.
I think the problem is, when it comes to refugees, many of the countries, they obviously have issues that are quite different to New Zealand. New Zealand is one of those countries which is isolated geographically, so you can't get into the waters without going through Australian waters. So really the refugees all come through the UN. So it is different than, you're not likely to get somebody rowing up in a ship to get to New Zealand. They would go to Australia before New Zealand. That's what happened with Afghanistan. But and people have got really confused, and and refugees, and what it means to be a refugee, what it is to be an economic migrant. And many of the people trying to get to Europe, and they pay to get there, are economic migrants. They're wanting a better life, yes, but they can pay for it, but they are looking for a lifestyle that's better, I guess. And politicians are using that.
Right.
as a means of saying, oh, immigration is a problem, and everybody has decided that immigration is a real problem without understanding what a country would be like if there were no immigrants. I mean, places like Europe, America, New Zealand, it might be the cleaning jobs, so it's not quite as easy as that. There are many, but the politicians don't. They don't talk effectively. They don't communicate about. It's all rhetoric. It's all shouting. It's all argumentative.
Absolutely. Amidst all these things, you talk about one country who stands, who stands out in terms of, refugees. So, can you tell us which country is it that has done some good work regarding this, and why do you think this particular country is?
It's been some time since I mean, to date, particularly with the wars in the Middle East, the country that takes in more refugees than anyone else in the Middle East is Turkey. And people think, oh, that's not true, but it takes in a huge number per capita. It's very responsive, and people try and get to Turkey, and then they will go elsewhere. But Turkey takes them in, because I understand, I mean, recently I've had people trying to come to New Zealand from Gaza. And New Zealand has been reasonably okay with that. But you've got to have you've got to already have a application and process for them to appeal and all the rest of it. And so a lot of refugees are going to Egypt, and it costs per person to get there if you're going to stay in Egypt. And if you go further, it would be even less. So, it could be more. If you go further, they won't. But if you go outside Egypt, they won't charge. But it causes many, many problems. So it's not just it's not just the human traffickers that cause problems. It's everybody. And when they come to a country, work I have done is that it matters if they have jobs and they get health care, because having a job will enable them to feel better. They'll be able to keep their families, and they can learn the language of the country they're in. And people just say, oh, increase the numbers, but it's not as simple as increasing the numbers. You've got to have something to make it worthwhile for them to want to stay. I mean, recently there was somebody, and the daughter was drowned, and he said he had applied 14 times in Europe for a place to stay for residency, and he couldn't. He had applied 14 times, and eventually she died in a crash, but he was trying to do everything to try and get the families out. And that's the problem, is that the rhetoric is that, oh, everybody is bad. Not everybody is bad. And countries couldn't survive without them, in many cases. They do more good than harm, but people don't understand that. They see the bad side, unfortunately.
Right. So who are the other countries who you think have more responsibility, and they should be doing more than, even Turkey, that it is doing?
I think Britain should be doing more. Of course, I'm against sending all immigrants and refugees to Rwanda. And I've been to Rwanda, and it is a third world country. There is no way, they say they'll be okay there. I don't think they will be. A lot of people left Rwanda. Rwanda wants some money. That's why they're doing it. I mean, but they need to be more responsible about that. They need to take on board that not everyone is bad, but you've got a big population that will say, oh, they're taking our jobs, they're taking our housing, look at them, they're bad. It's not, but the government isn't helping them because they're not providing them with opportunities. And it doesn't also make it, it's a problem with religion. People from Ukraine because they're white and of the same religion, but they're not willing to take people from Gaza because it's a different religion.
Right, right.
I object to the fact there shouldn't be any difference. Communication should matter, but it shouldn't matter where they come, you know, about the religion, but it does. It does to the West.
Right, right, Lucia. So do you think refugees from whichever countries they are, they have not been able to properly communicate about themselves better, that they are not political activists, that they do not have any hidden agenda, that they are pure refugees? Is the UN also not able to take up their case better, though there is a section of it on refugees itself?
Yeah, I don't think they are. They're not very good. Refugees are not very good at advocating. You get the wrong type of people advocating. It could be, for example, I'll take, for example, in New Zealand, there's one family I know, they are Kurdish. And one person grew up in a refugee camp in Iraq because they fled from Iran, and they were in the refugee camp for 10 or 11 years, came to New Zealand and couldn't speak a word of English. There's about 4 or 5 children in the family. And this one person is now is a psychologist with the gym, you know, with the prisons, a criminal psychologist with the prisons, etc. Now, and didn't know a word of English. Now she does, and she teaches other people about that. Now, who says that's not a bad person? That's useful to have in the system. But people don't realize the good that everybody can do by being. That's a real problem, you know.
Right, right. You also talk about, talk about seniors in our society. And you see, amidst all these things, when communication is there, a lot of communication is leading to loneliness. And a lot of seniors are not able to embrace the new tools of communication. So that is also leading to loneliness. You advocate that they should be using more of technology in the right manner. I want to understand
that. Should use technology, but they need to be taught how in the right way. And there is a miscommunication almost between seniors and those who are teaching seniors, those, 30, 20, because then they get annoyed and they think, oh, you're too old to deal with technology. We're not going to teach you. We don't know. And they don't know as much as they think they do. I had a friend just even yesterday in New Zealand looking at simply the new, trying to ask the shop assistants what it is about technology. Can you do this, this, and this? I've got a TV from 2012 or something like that. And although they don't answer the questions properly, they don't know. They think that you're stupid rather than explaining what it is, because they don't know what you don't know. They couldn't explain about downloads because they explain about Spotify, but they don't understand that once we had CDs and cassettes and records and you download onto computer, but they don't understand how you can have these on your computer without downloading from Amazon or Spotify or something, it's so there's a complete mismatch between understanding and doing But I think seniors need to embrace society needs to enable them to do that, to become less lonely and to be part of, well, yeah, to communicate better with their families.
Absolutely. The teacher needs a little bit of learning themselves here, looks like.
It is. I think so. I think, you know, and I think that people when they're older start thinking, oh, they don't know very much, or they, you know, they think it's all their problem. But the people who are younger don't know either. They don't understand the older people. So there's a big disconnect.
Absolutely. You have written a book on this, SeniorITy, how AI and tech can enhance. Who is that book for? Is it for the teachers or is it for the seniors?
It's for seniors and it's for the caregivers. And it's really for seniors and caregivers. The people who can find ways of help those when the technology, particularly if they're working in the home, but they can't get frustrated with them. Too many people say they understand technology, but they can't explain it because they don't really understand. But we think they do. But it's only a matter of explaining, and then people will be much better. But people have also forgotten the art of communication. So they can't compute, so the generations can't communicate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is much to learn about communication and learn about so much of communication and how we can effectively use it in all spheres of life that we just talked about, be it political, corporate, personal, even in the senior best living, even the younger generation who needs to learn a bit more about technology so that they are able to explain it to those who actually need it for the best in their lives. Be that as it may, for people who would like to connect with you, Lucia, what is the best way for them to do so?
Oh, the best way is by email, lucia.claire.dore@gmail.com or lucia@luciadore.com. That's
Wonderful.
the best. Okay.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap of this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.